and welcome. As the Anglophone, the year-long Anglophone crisis continues morphing with hard-to-predict ramifications, we ask who is behind the lethal attacks targeting security officers, especially in Cameroon's northwest region. And that's the pioneer leader of the band Cameroon Anglophone Civil Society Consortium, Agbo Bala, muses over his exclusion from the entity. We query the timing and rationale behind Bamileke demands for their own fair share of what they call the national cake. These and lots more will comprise the menu for our weekender edition of Canal 2 English Special. We debut deliberations in a jiffy. And I must tell you, we are fortunate to be rubbing shoulders in this other edition of the program with someone who comes from the United States of America. He's actually a former U.S. Senate candidate, but of course, he owns Cameroonian origins. Welcome, Charles Nana.
Good morning. Thank you.
Some people actually watched you on Canal 2 International this morning on the Wake Up Show.
Yes, I have been in Cameroon for the last 4 to 5 days, and I've been trying to add my own 2 cents in the economic development, as well as to try to see if we can bring this crisis that is threatening the nation to an end.
Do you consider yourself Cameroonian or American, or more American than Cameroonian?
It's a tough question, right? Because to run for United States Senate, as you mentioned earlier, there are 3.5 million Africans in the United States. None has ever run for a United States Senate. Fortunately, the only African that ran happens to be a Cameroonian. I'm a Cameroonian by birth. My heart is in Cameroon, but I have American nationality as well.
And the current crisis actually plays into your heart, right? And
it doesn't please my heart. It pierces my heart. My heart bleeds when I hear and I see what is happening, because these are issues we can resolve. We can come to the table. When each time I have an opportunity, as I addressed a group in the United States about a month ago, the question I asked all Anglophones and Francophones: what were the aspirations of our parents when Cameroon was being partitioned to the French and the English?
Okay.
Their hopes and aspiration on both sides of the Mungo was that we would be one country, bicultural, bilingual. So the last 2 administrations has not delivered the goods, but that is not enough reason for us to want to separate. My heart bleeds when I understand that gendarmes were killed in the Northwest. My heart bleeds when I see innocent children and people are killed in their homes. So, but I think we can resolve this. I think we can come to the table and agree on something that will be beneficial for all Cameroonians.
I'm happy to have you on the panel, and your eloquence is quite elating to some of us, and I guess to most of our viewers out there. We'll be coming back to you because especially you are organizing a series of training workshops, business-oriented in Douala, in Cameroon in general.
Yes, not only Cameroon, but Africa. What we do is we look at the atmosphere, that is happening in Africa, and select workshops that could help African nations and African businesses. And as we'll talk a little bit more, crisis management and managing in crisis is at the top of our list. And the other second one on our list, only those 2, is project management. All of Africa is under construction. Okay. And every construction you do or any initiative you do is a business, it's a project, and you need to know how to manage those projects. So those 2 things are desperately needed, especially now in Africa, when the nation, the continent is not, the continent needs that type of help at this time.
Some analysts have said Africa in general is currently seated on rickety pedestals. But are you comfortable if I, to set the salvo, tag you or label you as pro-government, pro-Cameroonian government, even though you're American?
I don't think someone has ever labeled me as a pro-government. I am, again, as I said, I think I'm in a unique position. And let me, if you can give me a minute or 2 to elaborate.
I'll give you 30 seconds. 30
seconds. I was born in Manfi, went to school in Yaoundé, spent 30 years in the United States. I can see all sides of the conflict. And I think that we can resolve it. We don't need Western nations to help us. We have the expertise. We just have to be humble enough and say we have children who are among the best of the best in the world. Let's bring them home. Let's look for a conflict. Every single Cameroonian, be they Anglophone or Francophone, is only looking for a way in which we can all live together as one nation.
Thanks.
We live with the aspirations that our grandparents wanted, a united country with a diverse culture that is a strength and not a weakness.
That's 55 seconds you used in speaking. I'll give the next guest on the panel about equal time. I don't know how much senses are going to calculate equality in this, but he comes from Bafut in the northwest region. That part of the country has been claiming the headlines in recent days following the well, unprecedented events that happened out there. The killing of 3 gendarme officers in the space of 48 hours. Welcome, Shune Siaka. You are analyst on the panel tonight.
Good afternoon, Divine. I'm deeply excited and delighted to be part of this forum once more to give a deep insight.
Thanks for accepting our invitation.
Yes, to give a deep insight into the burning issues happening in around Cameroon today. We are at the crossroads of the history of this nation. Whether we like it or not, the history of this nation will never be the same again. As a matter of fact, in this political dispensation where we find ourselves, it is but a clarion call, a national clarion call, that we have to put our heads together to make sure calm returns back to this once beloved national triangle of us, Cameroon.
Where does your heart beat for, Shune Siaka? Does it beat for the federalists? Does it beat for the separatists? Or does it beat for those who think Cameroon should remain one and indivisible, like Nana Shah was reiterating a couple of moments ago?
It's a complex political dispensation where diverse opinions are finding ground on which to grow. I stand for the fact that Cameroon has always been a united country with the social and bicultural nature of it that has proven its worth in the League of Nations. And as a united country with these diverse cultural backgrounds, we stand tall in the League of Nations with this our strong bicultural nature. But in terms of the political dispensation that comes, there are a lot of diverse political views. The Federalists have their own pros and cons that they have been presenting. In terms of secessionists, I strongly want to say I never saw any accord of secession, so I begin to wonder where we are coming with secession. In terms of living as one and indivisible, it is proper, but the form of government has to be decided by the people. And I think federation is a form of government that doesn't come to disintegrate the nation. So secessionists or secession or whatsoever, I am for the fact that Cameroon is a united country, but the form of government should be decided by any political form, whether we go to a referendum or whatsoever. But I think we tested federation in yesteryears and it was excellent. We have tried a central government and we know it is failing and ailing, and I think a change of the form of government for the betterment of all Cameroonians should be an option to think of.
His heart should be ticking towards your direction. If he's watching us at this point in time, he's called Agbobala Felix Nkongo, the barrister, one of the pioneer torchbearers of the instability, socio-political instability currently rocking Cameroon since October 2016. Well, the latest is that, and this is our first talking point, he has been cast off the ranks of the Cameroon Anglophone Civil Society Consortium he helped put together at the onset of the current crisis. And I'll come back to you, Charles Nana. The fundamental reason posted by his peers in that very consortium is hinged on the fact that his most recent utterances show and betray a derailment from the original course. Is that something you buy?
Well, I don't know what his original cause was, because again, I think as a problem solver, that's what I've done for 25 years for communities.
Let's get some precision here.
Yes.
Agbobala has been clamoring for children to be allowed to return to school. He has been clamoring for deep-rooted and what he calls inclusive dialogue to set the pace for the start of a federal system of government, two-state federation.
Yeah, then I don't think that there's any conflict with most Anglophones on that. Everybody wants dialogue. I think this is where the issue comes in, and that's where we're approaching both sides and think we can help. You have the Anglophones in general. They are looking for a federation that starts or is based on the 1961 through the 1972 Constitution. Article 47.1 of that Constitution says that the form of the state will not be changed, should not be altered, is non-receivable. Now, our Francophone brothers approach the conflict looking at the Constitution of 1996, which talks about decentralization. But what bothers me, or which is, again, it could be the beginning of a negotiation. The best form of decentralization is federation. So why are we trying to go with substandard solutions when we know we have a much better solution sitting somewhere?
The government is going to argue by telling you that it has initiated decentralization.
Well, but we
finders may say it's not been taken to fruition yet.
Well, but again, and this is very unfortunate. We have some of the best and brightest individuals that can help us walk through this.
You're one of them.
That's what some people say.
That's what some say, right?
So, but let me go back to the difference where the Anglophones stand and where the Francophones are coming from. When I say the Francophones, the current government. The current government looks at the conflict and say, we want to start from the 1996. So we really have a constitutional issue. We had a constitution that was violated by President Ahijo by moving from the federal to the United State of Cameroon, which were, meanwhile, the Constitution clearly, United Republic of Cameroon, the Constitution clearly stated that that section is untouchable. So we violated that Constitution.
And according to you, is that where the breakdown started?
Well, the breakdown has started all the way back. Again, I look at this, that is why I keep bleeding and I'm screaming and saying, we as Africans, we need to decolonize some of these things that were done at our expense and bring our own children who go to the same schools with these guys, do better than some of these Europeans, to help us fix this issue. The Anglophones, even at the 1961 Fumban Accord, went to that negotiations with their hands behind their back.
Okay, we're going to come to talk detailedly about those hands behind their backs, because my colleague Kejan Henry says they were actually, that's where the word per diem got into the Cameroonian vocabulary, because the Anglophones who represented Anglophones at that conclave were actually tricked into submission. But coming back to you and coming back to Agbo Bala and the fact that he's been ejected from the consortium, some observers hold that this was predictable from January the 17th when he was incarcerated, and that created a vacuum at the helm of the consortium. And that wherever there's a vacuum, people clamor to fill space.
As a matter of fact, I want to give a flashback to the origin of this crisis.
Go ahead. You have 45 seconds. Right?
Yes, and by so doing, present the case for Agbo Bala. Agbo Bala, who stood up for the interests of Anglophone lawyers.
Yes.
And then the crisis now escalated and become an Anglophone crisis. So from that point of view, Agbo Bala came in, came in as a legal practitioner for the interests of his comrades.
Okay.
Then along the line, the crisis escalated to an Anglophone crisis. And that's where you have to, we got the change of opinion from originally what Agbo Bala stood off.
What did he stand
and
for
what he stands for. Originally, he stood for the fact that Anglophone lawyers wanted the translation of the, how do they call it? Of the Ohada law, the Ohada law, from French to English. He didn't stand for any Anglophone crisis.
There's some people who still think that, I mean, that clamor was initiated by Barrister
Barrister Abeng, who organized a press conference here, and on the eve of the conference, it was banned. And they considered that it was banned because they were Anglophones, and it was a sign of marginalization, that they could not express their views when they were in crisis.
If you fast track.
And so this is the origin for me for the crisis. And then it became now an Anglophone crisis. That steps, yes, when the teachers now had to step into, because the teachers' crisis has been hanging in the air for a very long time. We know that they put in so much, but they get so less. So now it now had to get a flashback right to the 1961 Constitution, as illustrated by my comrade, which gives the origin of the Anglophone crisis. Because for any solution to come, we must take a flashback to the constitutional coup d'etat that occurred in 1972, when the Article 47 of the 1961 Constitution was violated without consulting Anglophones. So this is just an outbreak of a long-standing grudge that has been hanging over this nation. And I think that for us to get a way forward, we have to take some few steps behind and try to get into the details of these grievances affecting Anglophones. Actually, I've not come here today I've come here today actually to analyze political facts that will bring this nation together. Okay. To analyze political facts that will lead us to genuine dialogue and integration.
Now, I'll stay on you with the question. I want a tangible answer, Shune Siaka. The jangling courts of discord currently rocking the consortium. Was that predictable? Were they predictable after the arrest on January the 17th, 2017 of Agbo Bala, the power torchbearer of the consortium? I
would say without any fear of contradiction that it was predictable. Why? Because when Agbo Bala and his team were arrested, we now saw the coming of other pressure groups that claimed now to become the leaders of the Anglophone crisis, thereby struggling to subdue Agbo Bala and his team, who had been spearheading the crisis. And by so doing, it now comes in with conflict of interest, conflict of position, conflict of ideology, conflict of leadership, and financial crisis, because we were saying fund me this, fund me that, and we have heard about people go fund me, people who have raised a lot of money, and they have not given any explanation with exactitude how this money has been spent towards resolving the Anglophone crisis. I mean that guys have come from behind and people are benefiting from this crisis, and there are some people who want this crisis to continue because they're making a lot of money from it. I mean people from the Anglophone side, people from the actual government, and people in the civil society.
According to an online lodged statement, Charles Nana, the consortium officials, including Tassan Wilfred, is a teacher, because the crisis also was triggered partly by teachers. They accuse Agbo Bala of peddling the consortium and, you know, treating it as if it were a personal belonging. And that's why they say, it's time out for you. So we need to take over the consortium again and use it, even though it is still outlawed, and use it as a bargaining power. Is that the way to go? Has Agbo Bala lost grip of the leadership of the crisis?
You're asking me to speculate on something that I don't know, and I'll not go take in a wing and say something I don't know. But
let me come to speculations, Nana Shah, but then this is not speculative. There is a statement which dislodges Agbo Bala from the helm of the consortium.
That is a fact. Because again, apparently it appears that his people with whom they initiated the initial phase of the consortium assume or feels that he has gone astray on some of the beliefs. But I want to highlight something here which is very clear, which is very obvious, that we need to look at it, right? You have to look at it holistically. Even among those who clamor for federalism, they come from different angles. Yes. For example, I talked about that I dream and the aspirations of our parents, our forefathers in Cameroon, was to have a united country, a federated state, a federated Cameroon. Two states at the time. And still now, even moving forward, the question is, should we have 2 states, 5 states, or 10 states? But however, within those who advocate for federalism, they come, it's a whole range, and they come there from different angles. I learn in federalism from the perspective, I'm a very strong Pan-Africanist. I believe Africa should have one voice. We should unite all African countries and have one voice, so we can lobby and we can have weight in international affairs, so we can have bigger economy, because our people are connected, our economies are connected, but we don't leverage that strength. And we have the youngest, the future is in Africa. Until we understand how to speak with one voice, be united, and our youth should be given the skill sets to be able to excel and be among the very best in the world. But our colonial masters continue to play us. Why should we be fighting along colonial lines or linguistic lines? Where is our African culture to determine statehood? Why should it be French or English that determines statehood in Africa? Okay. It doesn't make sense. We should work with our people to make sure that we do what is right for Africans.
Okay. Now, you were talking about speculative questions. This is going to be a speculative questions, and I'm going to turn over to you, Shune Siaka. In Cameroonian parlance, when you say soya, it means you probably have received bribe. Am I correct?
Yes.
Are you going to toe the line of those who insinuate that Barrister Agbo Bala has eaten soya? And that's why he has this verbal tone shift.
I would consider that as an outburst of primitive, savage, and intellectual buffoonery.
I like that.
First, Agbogbala is a renounced human rights activist. And one of the basic and fundamental principles of human rights is the fact that for peace and tranquility to prevail, you must go through dialogue.
Okay.
And we have radicals who have invaded this Anglophone crisis and believe that they can only use violence to resolve it. Agbogbala, with the background of a human rights activist, believes that through dialogue, we can get better solutions to this crisis. That's why he has taken that approach, and he's been talking with a few people nationally and internationally. And for the radicalists, they think that he's now a sellout. For me, he's not a sellout. He has eaten no soya, in quotes, according to the Cameroon Phalanx. I think he is just exercising his intellectual prowess as per the assignment that he has started to go ahead to work for the interests of the Anglophone Cameroonians.
Some say, and Nana Shao, some say before his incarceration, he was so tough talking that they don't understand that he comes out of prison after 8 months of incarceration and then changes his tone until he goes on an interview on BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, on October the 24th, and then calls for children to return to school and says everybody should be allowed to believe in their ideologies. That's where they say he's a sellout.
Well, without referring to him or to Agbogbala, because again, most of these things are speculations. But if you say he believes everybody should believe in their ideology, that's correct. I agree. Because again, as I said, a lot of people come on I know he's a federalist because I've heard him talk a lot about federation. But he might come to federation from a different angle from other members of the consortium. Remember, it's a spectrum. It's a whole range. People come from different backgrounds, and you bring that background to the table. But I would just have to say we should be a little bit cautious, right? Two things. Number one, whether he ate soya or he didn't eat soya, if we were not in the room, we cannot tell. So none of us should declare if he has eaten soya, he hasn't eaten soya. Then the second issue, which is putting someone within a small four-wall like this, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, can transform certain people.
Okay.
So we just have to be, I just want us to be a little bit cautious in our statements of facts, right? Nobody has evaluated him and know in what state he is.
Okay.
So I cannot make those type of judgments. But he has his right to have his views. If he strongly believes that federation is the way to go, I think our brothers should have pushed a little bit further and say, what form of federation are we talking about? It doesn't have to be Western type federation. We can have our own federation.
His right to his opinion actually culminated in a national attack on his late father's residence at Bakweli, that's near Kumba in the southwest region, if I'm not very mistaken. Some say, Shunesiaka, because we're saying these things and not mentioning some of the deep-rooted facts, the consortium is an outlawed entity in Cameroon. We contacted the PR, the Public Relations Department for Agbogbala, and they say that because the consortium is illegal, the statement or the communique posted online is a non-event.
Who can certify that information in the first place? Who posted it, secondly?
It actually bears signatures from 8 members who call themselves members of the consortium. They're led by, among others, Tassan Wilfred, who was Secretary General of the outlawed entity.
Yeah, we understand very well that Tassan Wilfred and Agbogbala had been at loggerheads since when he was incarcerated, because right in incarceration, Agbogbala objected some of the postings that Tassan was doing on behalf of the consortium,
okay,
and especially the collection of funds towards running the consortium. So in that case, with his release, we thought that they would come together for a brief compromise, okay, and move ahead with the management of this crisis. But that has not happened, and it goes without any again saying that in the absence of any genuine dialogue, what comes and goes around becomes cacophony, and we have to take it with a lot of caution. Okay. We know the consortium is no longer legal. The consortium is banned. So anything coming from it is speculation, as Mr. Nana earlier said. And while working on the speculations, we have to be very cautious, because either it can bring harmony or it can bring discord, because this information is not founded. Okay. So I'm of the very strong opinion that we treat it with a lot of caution. And Agbogbala has been talking to the press. He has not spoken to the national press since he left incarceration, I think so. He spoke over BBC. We are looking forward to him coming back home and talking to the national press to clarify all these doubts. Okay. We know where Tasang finds himself. He's operating his own communication under illegal methods, because he's purported in court to be wanted. Okay. So we think that the right person who can clarify this stalemate is Agbogbala, okay, who is moving freely, and we are looking forward to him to communicate, to clarify this confusion.
Okay. I think we're going to head out now, thanks to producer Andy Maureen, to Kumbo in the Northwest region. That's an opposition stronghold. Permit my usage of that attribution for Kumbo, but I think it's always been. Proof is that one of the 3 gendarmes killed earlier this week was in Jakiri, which is not very far away from Kimbo. Hi, Lambert, Kevin, are you there?
Good afternoon, Dee. Good afternoon to the studio. Welcome to Kumbo.
So let's just get straight into the crux of the matter, Lambert. What are people saying about the ejection of Agbogbala from the helm of the consortium? Well, the illegal consortium.
Let me tell you that Kumbu is now with a lot of fear that another level of the strike is going to begin in a different twist, because, you know, people do not reason the same, and of course, people have received the news with mixed feelings. Okay. Yeah, with mixed feelings. And rather, many of them that I've talked to in the streets, they are thinking that another strike, another level of the strike has started.
Okay. So around you, people are worried, they are concerned, but are they referring to Agbogbala as a traitor, as we've heard in some part from some opinion shades? Not actually, but I know, let's say 70% they are thinking that he is rather a traitor in court, but considering the fact that he's a barrister, you know, barristers, they have their way of operating. They have the skills in which they operate. You may not know what is behind the bars, because maybe you haven't had any problem, any case to go to in court, then you will know very well that you can't define who a barrister is. Okay. Now, Lambert, I have heard some people say that Agbogbala's decision to call for a return to school actually was tantamount to his committing political suicide. Is that the impression some people hold in that part of the country?
Definitely, that's what some people are saying. But others are for the fact that he has changed his mind automatically. And that is, I'm going back to what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm telling you that there is no way you can predict what a barrister can do. They have been trained for their work. They know exactly, they can do the undo. Okay. So, anybody who tries by all possible means to say that this is what barrister Agbogbala that I respect so much is going to do, I don't think the person is correct, because they have their own way of operating. And the way barristers, they operate, nobody, I'm telling you, nobody can tell exactly what a barrister can do in a few seconds.
Okay. Lambert, you know you're not gone away, because we're coming back to you. We have several topics lined up. One of them is Jakiri and the recent happenings in that part of the country. We'll come to you when we get to talk about Jakiri. Don't go away, right?
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Lambert. So would you consider, and I'll come to you, Shune, would you consider this as the beginning of the end of Barrister Agbogbala's political career, his aspirations?
I want to be very clear that I've never heard anywhere Agbogbala declared his political aspirations to run for any position or stand for any political party, because I know he's apolitical. And then secondly, I want to be very clear that social media has been dictating the tune and the tone in information management since along this crisis.
But you won't blame the social media writers and, well, self-proclaimed journalists. Even Donald Trump is
oh, yes.
a big writer on the social
And then
media.
we know how divergent their news and information has been. And by so doing, they dictate the tone of the crisis. The social media has condemned Agbobala and termed him a traitor. Sooner or later, he is going to come out again with another political stratagem, and it's the same social media that will turn him back into a hero.
Nana Shah, I don't know if you believe in Shune's predictions, but then the question stands, do you think this is the start of a political suicide for Agbobala? And would you be surprised in the days ahead if he was appointed into the government?
Will I be surprised? No, I cannot be surprised, right? Because, again, anything is...
a form of compensation for those who think that he has been bought over and pocketed by the Yaoundé regime.
Okay. It's possible, and I wouldn't be surprised if something like that does happen. But again, as a colleague said, I have never heard him declare that he was a political figure or he was a politician. He was a lawyer who found himself in circumstances, and that is why we need experts who can manage crises to help not only the government but both sides to bring this conflict to an end. Because when I look at the positions of both sides in the conflict, there's a lot of common ground. But our leaders have to be...
What do you mean a lot of common ground? When you look at...
There's a lot of common ground. Both sides are trying to radicalize, but there's a lot of common ground. The basis of the Anglophone conflict is a violation of the 1961 to the 1972 Constitution. Right. The Francophone approach is we have evolved. The country has moved forward. So we have a 1996 Constitution that talks about decentralization. There's a lot of areas where we can start a negotiation and say, how do we ensure that every child of this nation can participate in its governing? Okay. Yes. Unfortunately, and we have to admit it, Anglophones have found themselves almost like second-class citizens. I give a clear example why someone like myself, again, as I mentioned before, I was born in Mamfe, grew up in Yaoundé, but I went to the university in Yaoundé.
And your name is Nana,
and my name is Nana. My parents are from the Western Province. Right. But I was born in the Southwest. I went to school in Yaoundé. I took an exam for INSEAD in Gaoundéré. They gave me the questions. I spent an hour. I could not understand what they were asking me because the questions were written in French. A Francophone translated in the English that he knows how, and then you're asking an Anglophone to solve it. But it's not a laughing issue. And because of that,
and that's why
and other issues, of course, because you then understand that Cameroon was not for you. And so you leave to go to areas where today we rub shoulders with the best and the brightest in the world. Okay. But if I was in Cameroon, and that is the position of a lot of us in the diaspora, probably that would not have happened. My name is Nana and I'm Anglophone. So I'm really an incarnation of, again, you know what that means.
And probably that's why, Shune, this is for you, because he doesn't need to answer this. Probably that's why the staunchest criticisms on this government comes from abroad.
Yeah, we know that a lot of talented Cameroonians who would have helped in building this nation have found themselves in the diaspora, playing the second fiddle, even though we know they are claiming to be enjoying it. They are playing the second fiddle, whereas if they were in Cameroon with the intellect that they have acquired, they would have been the people managing this country.
And some say you don't fight a war from a distance. You need to be at the war front to feel.
Yeah, but at times you're required to move away from the war from the war front, arm yourself, and come back to the war front able to fight.
We're going to get to those targeting the security forces in Cameroon to find out if they have not gone abroad, armed themselves sustainably, and are coming back.
That's not what I mean.
But let's stay with you. Let's stay with you. As Agbobala beaten more than he could chew, was he so politically inexperienced that he found himself at a surprising post?
You know, we have sooner or later just forgotten about the ordeal that Agbobala went through for over 1 year in incarceration. And then we are now turning around to consider him as a saint who just appeared from the skies to save the Anglophones from their crisis. Cameroonians have just forgotten that a few months ago, Agbobala abandoned his family, and was incarcerated in Yaoundé.
He had no choice, really.
And he had no choice. And people have just turned around as if the guy is a saint who has been moving around and rubbing shoulders with the government of Yaoundé. You talked about the appointment of Agbogbala. And I wanted to step. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. It would just be a reincarnation of the meritocracy syndrome that we have been fighting for. Because we know Agbogbala is a young, competent Anglophone who is able to manage this country within the ranks of the administration.
Some say his appointment would be compensation. Well, disguised.
I don't think it will be any disguised compensation. It will just be because of the fact that he has pushed himself to the limelight. And because of that, he has been recognized and will be appointed. There are a lot of Cameroonians like Mr. Nana who is here. And because of what he's doing here today, they're going to see him somewhere around. And tomorrow, if you hear that he's appointed, it will not be like he's rubbing shoulders with the government in power. It's because he has got that opportunity to expose his skills, talents, and knowledge. That not everybody has that opportunity. And by so doing, you can't be appointed. So for me, it's not like a compensation. Doesn't he merit it in the first place? Okay. For me, I think he does.
I think you merit a place in this government. Personally, I do think. But then, do you think that those who stay abroad and call the shots through the social media platforms are the ones pushing Cameroon to the edge of the abyss?
I wouldn't say that, but a couple of things that was mentioned here that I can't let go, I need to address. Those in the diaspora who are trying, they are not enjoying it. Let me put it that way. Because someone said that some of them are behind the scenes. They're not enjoying it. We are as Cameroonian as anybody else can be. We bleed Cameroon. Most of our investments are in Cameroon.
You don't feel the pinch?
We feel the pain
when it goes down stretch from 2 to 5 days. When your kids don't go to school. I mean, you don't feel the pinch.
We feel the pain. And that is why we think, and then someone also mentioned that we are in a war. This is not a war. We just have a small family disagreement. We need to keep our egos aside, bring people who are competent and say, I just wish that our leaders can be a little bit humble and say, we do not have all the solutions.
I know a lot of people who are going to be very uncomfortable when you say that this is a small family quarrel. People have
can resolve this.
Blood has been spilled. It's not a small family.
It's most unfortunate. It's really, really, really most unfortunate that blood has been spilled of innocent children, innocent students. Some have been raped.
Schools have been blocked for 1 year running.
It's very unfortunate, really unfortunate. And that is why we need to come to the table. We need to keep our pride aside and come to the table. But I strongly believe that if the right people are there to advise the head of state, this thing would come to an end in no time.
Thank God you're here and your advice is probably reaching the right ears. We're going to be taking on our second talking point in the next couple of moments. But first of all, it's only normal that at this point in time we get a respite so we can breathe and relax on the panel. We'll be back in a jiffy. So, Bamenda, the regional capital of Cameroon's English-speaking Northwest region, has been imposed a nocturnal curfew that runs from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. It's going to stretch from the period spanning November 8 to 23. The decision follows the killing within the space of 48 hours of 3 gendarme officers, 1 in Jakiri in the Bui division and 2 in the Mezam division, and precisely around Bafut. And that's why I launched this phase of our deliberations with you, Shene Siaka. This marks a significant gear shift in the evolution of, well, what some call the Anglophone spring.
Yeah, I was deeply flabbergasted when I got information of the demise of 3 young soldiers.
That's between Monday and Wednesday?
Between Monday and Wednesday in Jakiri, in Bamenda, and in my native Bafut. I want to condemn in the strongest terms the attack on these soldiers. But on the other hand, I want to condemn also the inability of the government of this country to acknowledge the excesses of soldiers on civilians during this crisis.
Okay.
With this inability to acknowledge these excesses and call some of these soldiers to order, we have lost a lot of civilians that the government has acknowledged despite the discrepancy in the amount of people who have died.
Yeah, because
this
some people
now,
don't agree on the figures
yes,
posted.
this now creates a situation of retaliation.
Okay.
Because we have had excesses on civilians by soldiers. The government is not calling these soldiers to order. The people have decided to use their own means to retaliate. But I condemn in strongest terms any retaliation by civilians on soldiers.
Okay.
And I propose that this now brings us to the point where dialogue, inclusive dialogue, becomes inevitable.
Imperative.
Becomes inevitable in a situation now where civilians are now attacking soldiers. It will only lead to a civil war.
Okay.
So the government, if they have been giving deaf ears to this call of an inclusive dialogue, I think the moment is now.
I think well, those who back the government of Cameroon will tell you that on several occasions the government has attempted dialogue, but some of us who keep notes on the activities of the government can conclude safely that most of these dialogue initiatives have ended in flops. But I wanted to turn to you. I'm coming back to you, Shune. Self-rule activists. You know, this is an indicator that the self-rule activists are ready to stretch the limits and go the extra mile to seek self-rule when they begin killing gendarme officers.
It's most unfortunate. I believe I started the program by saying my heart bleeds. It's deeply unfortunate that civilians will be going after, and we have to condemn those type of atrocities on both sides. My position is, even if it's only one person that died in the entire Anglophone conflict and go strong, is one too many. We do not need our children, our parents dying. We can resolve this issue. There is no problem that is more than sitting down and negotiating. Number two, I'm pleading, I'm begging all of our leaders of good faith and goodwill to step up and make their voices heard. Let's bring this thing that has crippled the northwest and southwest of a country to a still. This has to stop. We need to identify leaders who are for the people to come out and say, what do we need to do? Then also the government has to understand that the people want to be heard. The issue in the Anglophone province is we have been second-class citizens for a while, and we are saying that is not the type of marriage or engagement that we came into.
Okay. The
1961 through 72 Constitution were very clear. The highest Anglophone, the highest Anglophone in the based on international protocol today in Cameroon is the 5th position.
Fifth place,
so it's a 5th place. It's a 5th place. And what happened when we started nominating Anglophone prime minister? We had 2 or 3 vice prime ministers. Okay. So most of the powers that were even given to the prime minister were taken and given to the vice prime ministers.
Okay.
So when you talk to some folks, they tell you we have a prime minister without a portfolio.
Shune Sheka, finally the government, and precisely somebody like Minister of Communication Issa Chiroma Bakari, is going to find vindication because he was accused when he referred to those burning schools, those attacking children going to school as terrorists. People blasted him. Right now, he's going to find vindication in the fact that he labeled these people terrorists when they come to kill security officers.
Oh, yes. You know, it is said that if you design a devil in the air, you end up to see it.
Can you explain that a bit? In other words, Minister Chiroma designed the devils on the wall?
I'm just saying that in our African tradition, proverbs are not meant to be interpreted. He designed the devil in the air, and we are now seeing it. Might be he was preparing the devil in the background, we don't know. But we are saying that we don't need to come to this. I earlier indicated that my presence on this platform today is to reinforce national unity and integration.
How do you do that when Jacques Famendongo, and I'm sticking with the government officials, when he tells CRTV's Actually de Hebdo on Sunday that the Anglophone crisis is over?
I do this.
And one day after, the first gendarme is killed in Jakiri.
I do this by passing the message to the authorities that be, that the purported dialogue they have been initiating and coordinating has not worked. That the authorities that they sent to the ground to do the dialogue have never been accepted by the people. That these authorities who go on the ground to initiate dialogue are deceiving them. That we need genuine leaders, leaders who can be heard and understood and accepted by the people.
What do you put in genuine? Who do you fit in there? Who is genuine enough to negotiate?
I'm talking about civil society leaders, people who speak and are accepted, and to not mentioning names, we understand very well that these people who have been going down to the ground, to southwest and to the northwest, are not accepted. They are authorities and elites of the ruling junta. And no matter what they say, insofar as this crisis is concerned, would not ever be taken seriously. If the government wants genuine and inclusive dialogue, they should change their emissaries, change their portfolios. They should not be top CPDM militants.
Okay.
They should not be top government officials. They should go within the civil society and look for people who speak what they mean and mean what they speak. And instead of bringing political leaders who have made promises in earlier years and never respected to come now to do crisis management, they will be considered as the politicians of yesterday who never respected their political promises, and no dialogue will ever take place.
In reaction to the killings of those gendarme officers, the government has reportedly, well, because we've not seen any official document yet, issued international warrants of arrest. These target 15 so-called leaders of the Anglophone movement who are foreign-based. Among them is Julius Tabe Ayuk, who is the leader of the so-called Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia Governing Council. Is it feasible that he be arrested and extradited to Cameroon? And if that happened, is that the end of the struggle? Shall?
Again, I go back to, I think, my earlier position. I'm not one of those who speculate. I've heard that they've issued warrants for the arrest.
Is it feasible?
Remember, issuing warrants through the Interpol is feasible, but it depends now. Because if you issue, let's say someone resides in France, you issue a warrant for his arrest in France, depending on his status in France, you have to prove to the court in France that he has committed an offense that warrants him being extradited back to the country. So we have to be careful, right? So I don't know, I don't like to venture. I'm a business guy, I'm a problem solver, I'm a politician. I don't want to venture into law because I'm not a lawyer, okay. Right? I like to stay, I think I like to stay where I have my competency. But I know for a fact that if you want to, the extradition law, and it depends on the extradition laws between both countries. So let's say someone, again, let's stick with France. If France has an extradition law with Cameroon,
an agreement,
a bilateral agreement, because it's not universal. Because some of these guys, some are in South Africa. I don't know if South Africa has an extradition agreement with Cameroon. If they do, it gets to South Africa. They have a right to challenge it in court.
Okay.
And now the South African court has to look into it and said, okay, what are the merits before? So I don't like to get into an area which is not my expertise.
Okay.
Crisis management, I can help. And that is why we want to make sure that we get this thing resolved. But law is not my area, so I'll let my humble colleague handle that one if he's a lawyer. I don't know.
Before he comes, Shune is not a lawyer. Shune is an analyst, a socio-political one for that matter. Now let's move over to the machines because we have a first stopover. It's a report done for us by Gladys Sambo, which actually retraces what happened from Jakiri through Bamenda to Bafut and culminated in the unprecedented turnaround in the evolution of the Anglophone crisis, the killing of 3 gendarme officers. And of course, we learned that 2 civilians also lost their lives in the various skirmishes.
Jakiri, a subdivision in the northwest region of Cameroon, has made news for the past days. It is in this town that the first gendarme officer was killed ever since the crisis in the two English-speaking regions broke out a year ago. The 28-year-old Njonga Bienvenu, who hails from the North region, was killed by some unidentified youths who seized his gun. The incident took place while he and his colleagues were out to prevent Government Technical High School Jakiri from being burned down by the hoodlums who were chasing students from the school campus just a day after Government Bilingual High School Jakiri was ravaged by fire set by unknown men.
As a youth, it happened on that day, and comparing it with the incident that once took place in Jakiri when a gendarme officer was killed at the time we were still very young, people thought that it was going to be a similar situation. And that's why people of my age fled Jakiri town to the outskirts of the town and taking refuge there for the simple fear that there will be massive arrest and brutalization of civilians. But unfortunately, what particularly made me to stay at home, I'm more enlightened that I know that such things might not be haunting everybody. And secondly, we were just from burying our grandmother, and that could not send me out of my home so immediately. But I found out that it was not as the news is widely spread. For the gendarme officers might have picked one or two persons, but they were actually picking those whom they sent a kind of suspicion on them, especially as we have been having burning of schools around Jakiri subdivision. So it all was cooked up to those criminal acts. It was not only the issue of the gendarme officer that was killed, but that is what actually scared so many people out of the town, and the worst one that the gun was taken away from him.
Definitely violence is something that we would not advocate. Violence cannot solve the problem because violence, it propagates only more violence. So our first concern is that we have appealed to the people, whatever our difficulties, and in fact our difficulties have really been very well articulated by the bishops. We would not in any way endorse or condone any form of violence. There's a way, there's a possible for us to peacefully resolve the matter. And we appeal for tolerance. If there are people, for example, they're shooting people down and they're burning places, and in fact, nowadays it seems that schools are being targeted to be burned and targeting particular spots in schools, I think it's a sign that the people who are out to do this haven't got the sympathy for others. They cannot understand, they haven't got sympathy for others, they are absolutely intolerant, to say the least, about the situation, and it's not correct.
The incident traumatized administrative authorities and education stakeholders, students and even parents, whose fears once more increased.
Before this incident happened like that, we had some few students who were coming to school. I kept on encouraging the others to come to school. It's very unfortunate that the incident that happened scared most of them. But my message to them is that they should continue, they should come back to school, because the DO has guaranteed enough security. There's enough security for them. So it is for them now to come to school, because we are there, the teachers are there, we are there ready to do our work, so they should come back to school.
I believe that the parents have all been sensitized, and students will certainly be asked to go back to school.
Apart from education stakeholders, traditional leaders and clergies have blasted arsons and wonders why a fight for a cause should prevent pupils and students from acquiring knowledge. They question if they are preparing illiterates for the new government they intend to create.
Morong has cautioned especially the youths of this land that they should be very careful, that the present situation in South is horrible, and that they should understand what is happening, that they should not provoke a situation which will be unbearable for them. Especially what has just happened at Jakiri just a night ago, that a gun is missing from a law officer, and a law officer has died. And the woman has cautioned, especially the youths, that movement at night, especially at squares, in places where they know that these people patrol and do their work, that they should not be there and that they should not provoke them.
There's one particular thing that has touched me, is the issue of the fire. Because the idea of burning up of places, stopping children from going to school, is what has touched me so much. Because if you can go around burning places in the pretext of fighting for a cause, I think that you are not building that nation. You are not fighting for that cause. There is no reason of fighting for a cause by burning places. If these places are allowed intact, even whatever cause you are fighting for, when you succeed in that cause, you come back to make those structures.
There is no doubt that people have been terrorized. People are great, they are afraid. I've talked to parents, they want to send their children to school, but they are afraid because of what is going on. And of course, it's not only children who are targeted, but even the institutions, the schools that we have been burned. Some of our schools have been burned, which we understand. That's why I say the spirit of intolerance. One thing is clear: if people are fighting for a new country, whatever they call it, if that's what they're looking for, there's no way that country will come where we need people who are highly and well educated and qualified education to lead the country. Now, if in Bui division or in some parts of Kumbo, they don't want us to go to school, it means that they want our children to become the street cleaners, to become the riffraff, to become those who have no position at all. Their own children will become ministers and directors and delegates, and our children who cannot go to school will become those who have no place at all in the new government that they intend to create. I think our people need to rise up. I don't know what we used to do, but I think the intimidation should stop.
The killing of the gendarme officer sent several inhabitants fleeing. A day after the incident, activities were grounded, shops and markets were closed, while homes were empty. Neighboring villages were flooded with both young and old from Jakiri. The situation forced the divisional officer for Jakiri subdivision to convene a crisis meeting, calling on all those who fled the town to return.
This meeting of today was just to sensitize the population, sensitize the public, for them to understand that we need peace and we need the population to give us information concerning those who were involved in such orchestrated acts. And we were assuring them that they should come back and resume their normal activities within the town and let their children to go back to school.
Meanwhile, the gun that was seized from the gendarme officer who was killed in Jakiri was found a couple of hours later in front of St. Kizito Parish, Melim.
What is important is that the gun has been seen, and it is at the custody of the forces of law and order. You know, it will not be necessary for us to be telling you where the gun has been found, but what is important is that the gun has been found. The other things remains a secret for the gendarmes to carry on with their investigation.
It needed the intervention of the traditional regulatory society known as Nueron in the subculture to bring back the seized gun.
So that was a rather lengthy report prepared for us, and especially for this edition of Canal Do English Special by Gladys Ambo Ndibang. If I didn't mention that name, I'll probably run into problems. Now let's get back to Kumbo in the Northwest region, because that's the heart of the action for this edition of the program. Hi, Lambert.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I didn't understand that kind of language. That's Arabic, right? Today's Friday. Muslims are going to the mosque.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That you are welcome.
Thanks. Promises are that we said we're coming back to you, and we're back to you, Lambert. The question is, are those people Ndiban was mentioning in her report, those people who fled from Jakiri and other parts of the Bui division for their dear lives, are they coming back?
Most of them, we can rate it at 70%. They are already back in town, because presently I was in Jakiri this morning to actually see what was happening, but activities are resuming in Jakiri, but still very timidly. If you want to say 70% has come back from the bush, or have come back from the bush, we're not telling any lies.
Okay.
So some of them, they're actually coming back, because actually they didn't plan to go somewhere, so they are back. I spoke with a few people, though nobody wants his or her face to come out on the camera, but they told me directly that they are back, but they're still with fear that something can still happen.
Okay, Lambert, I listened to the subdivisional officer for Jakiri. I listened to the man of God. I mean, that's where you went to do the report after the gun that was seized from the gendarme officer who was killed was dropped for the authorities to recollect it. I also listened to the people in the streets. Lambert, would you say, at this point in time, Anglophone anger is turning against Anglophones? Anglophones are actually fighting among themselves now.
If I want to say yes, I am not far from the truth. Because you yourself, you speak English very well, you are an Anglophone. Let me tell you that so many people have become so angry, and I don't know who is angry against who. Everybody seems to be very disturbed. But if you want to ask them, who are those who are causing these continuous problems? Okay. Nobody is telling you. Right. Everybody is very angry. That's the fact. And the problem is the issue concerning fire. I told you last Friday, the issue about fire in the northwest and the southwest is a technical way, because the fire is really good. And the moment you want to complain that fire is not a good thing, the moment the fire will show you that you have to accept that I am good. So it's very dangerous when people talk about fire in a way. We can talk in other regions, but the fact is there. Fire, we don't know. We are still trying to know where the fire is coming from, but nobody can tell you. And the moment you try to be against the fire, the moment you are questionable.
Can we now safely conclude, Lambert, because we've had 32 fires in about 13 months. That's according to a research done for us on this very, on this very program by reporter Dominique Meme Mwakimu. Why is it that nobody is being arrested in relation with these arson attacks? There's a suspicion that there are some people who want this crisis to continue so they can make a lot of money, right?
If I had to confirm with a big yes, it's not a lie, because we have enough security. I keep repeating. There is security in Bui division. Sorry, there is military in Bui division. We have what it takes. We have the BE, we have the gendarme, we have the 22nd battalion. But they only come to the scene when the thing has happened. If we were really serious, we could have sent at least 4 of the military men each to all the schools to see exactly whether we can see the ghost. Okay. But if we are sending after the market, there's a question mark. If some people are saying that the what is eating the meat is inside the meat, then they are not mistaken.
In other words, that conclusion is another African proverb, which means that you suspect those who are supposed to be stopping the fires from happening, right?
One can be tempted to say so because they are there to secure our lives. But every day, schools are being bought. What is happening?
Okay, I want to thank you very much, Lambert, for accepting to talk to us once again.
You're welcome, G, and we wish all the best and keep praying, because Kumbu, Bui division in particular, is becoming unbecoming. Nobody can predict what tomorrow holds.
Okay, I just want to inform you and inform our viewers in that part of the country that the phone of Zo is being loaded. Is it the second? The third?
The third. The first.
It's actually in Douala for a fundraiser happening this weekend. They want to build a new hall at Bonaberi. We'll be reporting on that for our viewers in your part of the country. Thanks a zillion, Lambert.
I am very sure that you're going to put on your cap before you visit him, because the phone on top is still that man that has tradition that works. I'm sure that you're going to put on your cap before you approach him, because as a son of the soil, you don't need to go and see your father in the phone without your cap.
Until you can confirm that last fact, if I'm a son of the soil or not. But Lambert, thanks again. And one fact that proves that the phone of soil is almighty is the fact that when he sent out the Mwero, that's a traditional authority, the gun that was seized from the gendarme officer who was killed was actually found. Now, let's come back to the panel and come back to you, Shone Siaka. Do you also hold the suspicion that this thing is being perpetrated by people who are supposed to stop it from degenerating?
Oh, yes. I think that this political upheaval has reached a state where I'll describe it as a state of quagmire. The leadership of the consortium has disintegrated.
It's in disarray.
It's in total disarray. We don't know again who is in command. And we think this is the moment.
Mr. Seseku will tell you that he is the man.
Yes, he's in command in the diaspora. Meanwhile, schools are being burnt at home. The soldiers who are supposed to be guarding the schools are actually there. They can't give us an explanation how fire escalates in schools where they are surrounded by soldiers. Whether it's mystical or natural, that is yet to be interpreted and justified. I am saying that I have this question mark hanging in my head somewhere, that there are some people seated somewhere, well organized, who are benefiting from this crisis, and they don't want to see this crisis stop. And they are doing it at the disadvantage of the government. They are doing it at the disadvantage of Anglophones who came up with a genuine crisis that was understood by the government. They are doing it against a government that acknowledged the grievances of the Anglophone and promised to resolve it and have started resolving it. Then all of a sudden the crisis escalates. We no longer know who is in command. We don't know who is fueling the crisis. We don't understand what is happening. But what we know is that somebody somewhere, whether it's a group of them, are encouraging this crisis to continue because they are benefiting from it financially, they are benefiting from it economically, they are benefiting from it in other ramifications.
Some say the political benefits will begin pouring down very soon. Yeah. But let me turn over to you, Nana Shao, and ask you this question. The fact that gendarmes are killed, the fact that schools are burned, speaks volume about the kind of government you can expect if the secessionists finally arrived at their ambitions.
Yeah, it is. It is
government that probably will not listen to opposing views. Is that what you're seeing in the future?
It's quite troubling that from the reports we're getting, because again I cannot. It's only speculation. I've never been to so I cannot say anything what that's happening there. But it's quite troubling.
Very reliable reporters everywhere we broadcast.
Yes, so it's quite troubling that schools that are surrounded by law enforcement get burned, get burned. How does that happen?
Okay.
So is it now the law enforcement is incompetent, or is it being done by law enforcement itself? And it's quite troubling. But again, we cannot use that again in any conflict, and that is why we need to bring this thing to an end. You have radicals on both ends. You have people, as you guys rightly say, people who think that they are benefiting from, but they are crippling our children. Our children are not going to school. We're burning those schools that are supposed to provide them the skill set that they need to be competitive, to be civil adults, to be adults that can be useful tomorrow. And it's sad. It breaks our heart. We do not even have good classrooms. We do not have good chairs. We do not have good paid teachers. But now we are burning the little that we have. What are we expecting? So it's very troubling.
Does it trouble you particularly that the people who are doing this probably paint a picture of the kind of government that will run any separated state?
Yeah, again, I've noticed you want me to speculate, and I don't like speculations. I deal with facts. I'm an engineer by profession, then a businessman, so I like to deal with facts. you're asking, you want to use the fact that a school was burned. We don't know, from what you guys are saying, reliable sources, that it might be burned by law enforcement, or it might be burned by people who come mystically overnight and burn it. To use that and extrapolate how the people, those, how do you call the consortium leadership will look like in the future, that's above my pay grade. That's really above my skill set. I don't want to speculate.
I'm bringing that question to you, Sean Esiaka, in another form. When you look at the future and you say to yourself, if this thing finally succeeded or culminated in the split of Cameroon, one part of the country, that's the Anglophone part of the country, will probably have a government that does not listen to opposing views. This is radicalism being demonstrated when you touch schools, when you kill security officers, when you don't accept opposing views from Agbo Bala, for example.
I cannot procrastinate, but it is still left to be identified whether they are the Anglophones who are burning the schools.
I'm not getting any response from this. Go ahead.
I said, I don't still know whether there are Anglophones who are burning the schools. We are waiting for investigations. The government has opened investigations. Whether they are hired terrorists or hired secessionists, I don't know, but I am very, 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 very disturbed, because one of the strongest weapons of the Anglophones in this conglomeration of the national triangle is the educational system. Okay. It's the educational system that has given them the upper hand above all other Cameroonians. And using their strongest weapon to lay it as a bait for a crisis is disastrous, because they are breaking what is making them stronger than any other Cameroonian. You realize that most Francophones in the earlier years, in the past few years, are sending their children to go and study in the Anglophone system. Nana is a beautiful example of one. And that strong system that everybody wants to be part of it, that everybody wants to copy, is what you have used as a bait to fight the crisis, stopping your education, burning the schools, destroying the system that you have used to put yourself on top. I begin to wonder whether those who are doing this are really the real Anglophones who wanted to fight for the Anglophone crisis.
Let me just add that no Anglophone was happy when we heard that Sacred Heart was burned down. Part of it. Sacred Heart is used. I never went to Sacred Heart, but we looked at Sacred Heart as the epitome of excellence in the Anglophone system. So when an Anglophone sits and hears that Sacred Heart was burned, they hurt, they bleed. And I don't like to speculate. I can in me think that an Anglophone will go and burn Sacred Heart. But again, I wasn't there. I can't draw facts, and I cannot make assertions on things that I have no facts based on. So I stay away from those type of things. But it's really hurtful, and it's sad. It's really sad.
On several occasions, and that's just for the sake of clarification, the government of Cameroon has announced the launch of investigations into some of these occurrences. But so far, we've not had any reports from any of those probes. But we'll be waiting, because patience, they say, never kills anybody. And of course, the most patient are those who come off with the biggest gains. We'll be delving into our third major talking point for this edition of Canal Do English Special in a moment. I just think it's time for us to take another break. And so, if you want me to tell you a story, here it is how it goes. The LACAM is a restrained caucus of dignitaries and traditional custodians of the Bamileke people of Cameroon's West region. Of course, those are the economic powerhouses of this country. But then, in the recent statement addressed to President Paul Biya, they actually call it the LACAM Memorandum. They are saying that they want their own fair share of Cameroon's national cake, and alongside that, decrying marginalization in the distribution of appointments into government by the government of Cameroon, of course. I don't know who stopped talking, but I think I will start with you, Nana, because you are from the West region. Am I correct?
Yes, you're very correct.
Do you think Bamilikes are cheated in the allocation of the national cake?
Oh, absolutely. But let's not confuse.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that yes?
Yes, it's a yes. It's a big yes. Absolutely. If you look at the population of Bamilikes in Cameroon and the number of Bamilikes you have as in top positions, either as ministers or as directors or as ambassadors, they're almost non-existent. But before we switch, I want to make sure we're clear on this because there's a lot of confusion. The Anglophone issue is an issue of national unity. The Bamileke issue is an issue of national integration. It's an issue of national integration. For Anglophones, for Southern Cameroon and La République du Cameroon to have come together, we required a constitutional conference.
The fact
that was not required for Bamileke and Bassa and whatever it is to come together. So I just want to make sure we understand that. Because we have two sets of issues.
Former colonized territories coming together in a wedlock that up till today is still controversial. That's just to clarify
that's an issue of national unity. So now, when you go into the issue of national integration, you find that Bamilekes have. Let me give you a practical example for Bamileke children, which is one of the things. If you're an Anglophone, Bamileke, when you took the A-levels, you did well. You know what happened? They didn't send you abroad. You had to wait 1 year to get integrated with the Francophones. If you look at Bamilekes make at least 40%, somewhere between 35 and 40% of the Cameroon population. How many ministers do we have?
They only occupy 5% of government positions in Cameroon. And they say going by demographics, which you clearly mentioned, going by economic prowess, and of course going by the politics of regional balancing, this is sidelining. It's segregation. Shanda Tomne and Pokam Sinjun, who actually signed the October 31st memorandum, a copy of which was addressed to President Paul Biya, say it is apartheid. Is that an exaggeration, Sune?
For me, it's a gross hyperbole, which means it's a gross exaggeration.
This comes after the Betis.
Yes, the Betis. It is a very controversial topic, but it can all happen in Cameroon. Cameroon is the only country where regional balance can go above meritocracy.
Okay.
Whereby somebody from the West can be appointed against somebody from the East. Not because the person from the East is not competent, but because the person is from the East, and at this time they have to compensate somebody from the West.
Okay.
Even if the person does not merit the position. These are some of the fallouts of regional balance that only exists in Cameroon's political dispensation, whereby people are appointed because they come from particular regions, not because they merit those positions.
But would you say the Burmese are correct in their claims?
I am condemning this claim because it started with the chiefs from the central region.
It actually started from the far north with...
From the far north, L'Appel du Nord.
Right.
L'Appel du Centre, when the Anglophone activists were released, the Betis asked for their own
brethren to
be released. People who have been found guilty of corruption.
So that's a clear juxtaposition.
Yeah, and then you now want them to be released because young activists who were on the streets claiming their basic fundamental rights were also released. I think that this is something we have to kick out of the system, because by the time we have a federated state, this issue of regional balance will no longer exist, and we'll have more competent people holding competent positions and be able to deliver the goods and move this country ahead.
Now, here is Dominique Meme Mwakimu with a beautiful report on how we came to this. How could the Burmese think that they are cheated in the distribution of what they call the national cake?
No to discriminatory appointments and promotion in high offices in Cameroon. An open statement from LACAM, a traditional civil society association of the people of Bamileke land and west region of the country in general. In a petition addressed to President Paul Biya on the 31st of October 2017, LACAM quotes Cameroon Tribune, a state newspaper of 25th October 2017 edition, of having published names of persons appointed to the external services of the Ministry of Communication without a name of a son or daughter from the Bamileke land. In the two-page petition signed by Dr. Jean-Claude Shanda Tomé and Professor Sinjun Pokam, the Association of Bamileke People has observed with a deep sense of regret how elites from the West region have been continuously sidelined during appointments. The petition cites the magistracy, the administration, custom and the taxation departments, as well as the central administrative services. To Lakam that feels unsatisfied with the appointment procedure in the country, the petition teaches that the hitherto 5% appointment portion reserved to the Bamileke people has been reduced to 0%, an attitude the signatories of the petition say it's contrary to the preaching of national unity and cohesion. The people of Bamileke through the petition frowns and point accusing fingers at close collaborators of President Paul Biya for masterminding the relegation of the people of the West region to the background when it comes to appointment into high position of decision-making in the country. Lakam called on President Paul Biya to address the situation immediately before it degenerates to what they call a new form of apartheid, carefully designed and put in place by some members of government. The petition, however, recognized the fact that the President of the Senate and the Secretary General of the CPDM party are Bamileke men, amongst others from the land in high positions. Lakam observed that peace and unity will reign in the country when justice and honesty is practiced in governance.
That was Meme Dominique Mwakimu, the primetime news presenter on our sister radio. It's called Sweet FM. It actually broadcasts from Douala in Cameroon. It goes out to the world, reporting there on how the LACAM memorandum actually came about. But then this is confusing to some people who have read through that October 31st release from the body, which is, of course, the highest traditional representation for the Bamileke people of Cameroon's West region. They say Marcel Nyat Njifenji, being president of Cameroon Senate, is the second, you were listing in terms of protocol, is the second personality in Cameroon. Jean Kwete is Secretary General of the Politburo, the Central Committee of Cameroon's ruling CPDM party, and that these people should not be asking for any more.
Well,
is it greed?
I wouldn't look at it from that perspective. My first statement will be, although I recognize that, and I agree with the report, it's a consequence of a lack of meritocracy. And it's sad that as a nation we've come to that. But they started all the way back from President Aiju when they're trying to do some regional balancing. So a child who takes an exam will have 19 out of 20 simply because his name is Chakunte or Nana. He'll get excluded. Then they'll take a child who came from the north, who can barely write his name. I'm not saying everybody from the north cannot write their name, but a child from the north who can barely write his name gets the position.
Uncle Adamu Musa actually told me once that he actually changed his name to Adamu Musa just because he wanted to gain access to the state-run Cameroon radio and television. Well, it was Cameroon radio back then.
And it's sad because when there's lack of meritocracy and when we start talking about regional balancing, but what are we doing? It's ethnic politics. And we wonder why we are having this. We need to move. The number one issue we have in Africa, we have to figure out how cultures and different ethnic groups coexist.
But then Cameroon has a specialty, and it is resident in the fact that we have 250 at least ethnic groupings, which means if each of these groupings, Shune, started rising up and issuing memoranda, it's a dangerous precedent for the future cohesion of Cameroon.
It's going to be dangerous because you definitely imply that each village should have a minister. And by so doing, we'll end up with 250 ministers in this country.
Probably more.
Probably more, and which can't work. I am just embarrassed by the fact that they linked it to an apartheid, which for me is a gross exaggeration. And looking at the fact that Jean Kwete, who is the Secretary General of the ruling
Central Committee of the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement,
would define the policies how to run this government and hand it to the government.
Well, those are propositions from the
CPDM,
ruling party, right?
To be able to implement it, it's from the West. Looking at the Senate, whereby when these propositions come from the parliament, they are the people who promulgate it into, who vote it and send it to the president to promulgate into law, is from the West. And considering the fact again that, as a matter of fact, I've been in the New Deal party. I know this party very well. And I would say it without any fear of contradiction or complication that the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement.
Your former party?
As per, not former.
You still militate?
I've not officially resigned,
for the
but
CPD.
I think that we are still sympathizers. As per their books, I mean, the articles of association and whatsoever, remains one of the most organized political institutions in Africa after the ANC. But we know that it is not the status quo of the party that is bad. They are the people who have been put in to lead the party, who have misled the logo.
I hope you don't get ejected from the CPDM for saying these things.
I am saying that the party remains one of the most organized political institutions after the ANC in Africa.
But the implementers of its
But
policies.
we have some people in this party who have spoiled the image of the party. And if these people are brought to book, the party will work for the interest of the country, as per the policy of New Deal brought in 1985.
And Nana Shah, you're essentially blaming some people from what you call the Center-South region, which no longer exists, right? You say they're the least populated, but then they occupy the most number of positions in the present government.
I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying that it's very sad that we as a nation, we have taught our own children that meritocracy does not work. And we see that everywhere. If you're the director of a company or you're a minister, you appoint your cousins and uncles and nephews, and then those who merit to be there don't get jobs. And those are the same people you find now doing bensikin and the rest. And what happens to the nation? There is no country in the world as blessed as Cameroon. We have some of the best and the brightest, but we cannot take off. We cannot excel. Why can't we excel? We have the wrong people in the wrong places. And it's because we as a nation has agreed, have accepted that meritocracy has no place. So children whose name we just mentioned before this article came, children who come from, like some of us, I'm a Bamileke and an Anglophone. You can imagine now my troubles. You begin to see the enormity of, there's no way in the world the current government or any government in Cameroon will put someone like me in that position. But if our children, they understand that you work hard, you get benefits. Some of us, I am a product of the Cameroonian system. I went to primary school in Boya, in Yaoundé, École Bilingue, Collège Bilingue, Lycée Bilingue, and university.
I was scooping your background on Google before you came onto this platform, and actually, realized that you have been to some of the best universities in the US and so on. But when you came back to Cameroon, do you consider yourself lost? You don't fit in anywhere.
I don't.
You finally don't fit in among the Anglophones, and you don't even fit in among the Francophones, and you are not even considered the real Bamileke in the sense of the word.
And that is unfortunate thing. And I wouldn't really say that you're lost, but you're a fish out of water. Because you're looking and saying how I give scholarships to 4 different schools in Cameroon. And I've been doing that for over close to 11 years now. And I offer it to the best students. The issue is, how do we get the best and the brightest of us and encourage them and let them understand, if you work hard, you see the benefits. Some of us went to a host country, some of us left the country. We realized that if you work hard, as you said, I went to University of Chicago Business School. It's #1 business school, not only in the United States, but in the world. I didn't go into that school because my name was Nana. It's because they believed that I had something to contribute. I worked one of the top, actually, the last 15 years, I turned around companies, not only in the United States and in Europe. They don't bring me and pay me the top dollars because my name is Nana. It's because they think I can add something to their businesses. Where it hurts me the most is, what am I doing for my home country?
Okay. Thanks once again for bringing that eloquence to the panel. And Shune Siaka, considering that President Paul Biya actually snubbed the previous memorandum from the Betis, Is there any reason to believe he will give a listening ear to the Burmese?
I don't think so, because it doesn't fall within the policy of good governance. It doesn't fall within the policy of good governance promulgated by the head of state, His Excellency Paul Biya. I trust in his clairvoyance, even though at times he has been slow to decision, but I think he will come to his best decision. Several times, even when the Anglophone crisis just began, we saw top party elites come on screen on TV and say there is no Anglophone problem. But sooner or later, the head of state came out and proved them wrong and challenged them right in the heart of the party and told them there is an Anglophone problem and I'm going to create a commission to solve the Anglophone problem. So it is not the first time we have seen top party militants come up and say terrible things, and the head of state comes back after to correct them. That
this is going to be a delicate question. Shone Siakan, I stick on with you on this. If the president deploys peace emissaries, in fact, that's the best way I think we should refer to them, and they flop 1, 2, 3, 4 times, probably, isn't it time for him, with his clairvoyance that you refer to personally come down to the field and talk to these people?
We are all looking forward to that, because we are looking forward to see peace and tranquility come back in the Anglophone regions. So we are looking forward to a decision from him that will be able to calm this nation and treat us like one, and be able to address our different political aspirations, because not everybody is obliged to think the way he's thinking. Not everybody is obliged to think the way other people are thinking. But I think that for this crisis to be resolved, we need genuine dialogue, consultative dialogue, constructive dialogue, and bring honesty and put square pegs in square holes, rather than sending authorities on the ground, political leaders on the ground, to be able to consolidate peace where they have never found peace for themselves even.
I hope your home is not going to be fished out and set ablaze for calling for peace to return to the English-speaking regions of Cameroon. But then before the memorandum on the 31st of August, Nana Shah, the Bamili case had been circulating tracts in Bafoussam, that's the regional capital of the West region for precision's sake, indicating and threatening that they would join the Anglophones in their calls for self-rule if the government failed to take into consideration their demands for more attention.
I think that is wrong. But again, see, we're conflicting two different issues now. And I mentioned that the Bamile case, they are part of the former La République du Cameroun.
This for last.
Right? So if that is the case, we have, and we do actually have, an issue of national integration. You have a nation that has 10 children. 10 children. You have 2 that have already been screaming at the loudest they can. They have been breaking walls and say, Papa, you're not giving us anything. We don't even feel part of the family. Do something. But the father, maybe he's still waiting for something to happen before he responds. Now you have a 3rd child, still from a different mother, stepping into the fray. It's a clear indication that we have some issues. Okay. And we need to take serious negotiation. But the dialogue we're talking about has to be a 2-phase and a 2-pronged dialogue. I have to be very clear. One dialogue which is on national unity between Anglophones and Francophones, and one dialogue which is on national integration that involves everybody. So we want to make sure, because we sometimes convolute those two issues, and it's critical that we talk about those.
Thanks once again for coming. I'm looking at your flyer here, and one of the workshops is focused on crisis management and managing in crisis. Hopefully we'll have the chance to be part of your next training sessions. How long are you still in Cameroon?
I've been in Cameroon for about a month, and again, as I said, we look at things. This crisis management and managing in crisis is one of the biggest issues we want to do this year, not only in Cameroon, but in most countries in Africa. How do we resolve crisis so we don't get in the type of situation we find in the Anglophone province? And most of African nations are going through that. There are ways in which we can resolve crisis without a single blood shed. So we want to make sure we have that. And the second one I want to emphasize is a project management. Africa as a whole is under construction. We need the best and the brightest to help our businesses, help our communities to be solid. And to do that, we have to understand the key set, the skill sets, the competencies you require to make sure you have effective projects.
Thanks once again for coming, Nana Shah. We must remind our viewers that you are based in the U.S., where you're a former Senate candidate. I understand you wanted to challenge Jeff Sessions?
Yes, I ran, again, as I mentioned, there are 3.5 Africans in the United States. I ran for United States Senate, and I ended up with 43%. I didn't win, but I came close. But let me give my phone number. That's more important. 672-06-4748. Again, the number is 672-06-4748. For those who are interested in learning more about the workshops, and let's come together and see how we can help this nation grow.
Thanks sincerely for bringing along such eloquence to the panel. We'll never forget, and we'll keep you in the pipelines. Probably we'll bring you back as per the request from our viewers out there. Shune Siaka, thanks very much. Hopefully you're not going to Bafut very soon. Now everybody knows that you're CPDM, you could be in for deep trouble.
I think that our political aspirations don't have anything to do with the crisis.
Okay.
Because before the crisis, the CPDM exists in all parts of this country. And it doesn't mean that those who are crying are not going through the same thing we are doing. We are also going through the same crisis. And we are looking forward to see genuine solutions coming to solve these problems, because the problems have been acknowledged and are genuine. And we think that the best way to resolve this crisis is not through violence, it's not through aggression, it's not through intimidation, but it's through dialogue. Because in every house there are crises, and when there are crises in the house, the father has to sit the children in the house and see how to manage it, rather than sending some of the children outside and saying, okay, I will stay with the rest. I think we need genuine solutions for this crisis for us to promote national unity and integration and live peacefully as one.
Thanks once again for coming, Shune Siaka. Shune Siaka is an analyst. He's been on the panel before. He's coming back, and hopefully he's going to be there whenever we extend an invitation to him. Thanks also to Ndim Maureen. That's a special producer for Canal 2 English Special. Jean Onga was exceptionally behind the cameras alone for this edition. Marvelous job done. Roland Lebja was on the dashboard. Beautiful work, and kudos from the panel onto you. And from Cameroon to you all, God bless you. Have a splendid weekend.